Cinematic fundamentals. I talked about them and mentioned their importance in my previous video. There, I showed how you can quickly put together cinematic sequences using just Mixamo and Blend Swap. But throwing assets together is just a part of the story. All the little decisions about composition, colors, contrasts, timing, and editing, all that comes down to two things: your experience and your knowledge of fundamentals. In today's video, I'm going to show you the fundamentals in a more fun and interesting way by demonstrating a few ways they can improve your work and make your renders pop. After I finished my Master 3D Environments in Blender course, I knew I wanted to focus on a topic that goes more in depth. Something more fundamental that would guide the students from basics of art to understanding how cinematic shots are made. I spent a significant portion of the last 2 years building such a course, and now I was finally able to announce Master Cinematic Storytelling in Blender, my ultimate guide to cinematic art. All of my filmmaking knowledge, everything that I learned making game cinematics and short films, I poured into this one. Think of it as one of those fancy books on art and cinematic fundamentals, but in the form of video lessons. By the end of the course, you'll be able to confidently dive into short film creation, knowing your basics are solid. So if it sounds interesting to you, definitely join our waiting list, the link is in the description. Topic number 1 for all beginner artists should be the values and contrasts. Let's have a look at this scene. Yes, it's intentionally black and white, and here everything is kinda okay. The composition, the simple geometry, even the lighting is hinting at the character over here, but the contrast is just strange. The area of biggest contrast is in fact on the tree here, but it's blurred, so we don't really know where to look. Well now, let's just take this character and make it darker, so that it doesn't blend so much with the background, and suddenly the shot is so much more comprehensible. All it took was to use contrast, heighten it in a specific spot, and thus indicate the point of interest with it. In this case, of course, it's pretty straightforward, but this principle can really be applied everywhere. The theory of color is an unbelievably complex topic, and I dive into it in the course. When it comes to the practical application in your scenes though, majority of the times you'll be deciding between two scenarios. Do make your color palette analogous, only using one part of the color wheel, or do make it complementary, combining opposite sides. For example, in this scene, inspired by the John Wick movie, you may approach lighting this one in the very atmospheric way, choosing to combine the lighting from the many candles in the foreground with burning orange light coming from the windows. This creates a striking, almost monochromatic result, which may be completely okay if that's what you aim for. However, let's say we shuffle through the color palette and change the color of our background lights. Immediately, the result has changed a lot, and suddenly the main character stands out so much more. The result is maybe somewhat more, you could say, Hollywood-like. Well, that's because mainstream filmmakers often work with this sort of complementary color scheme, the orange and blue, or yellow and cyan. Maybe even too much, at the risk of being overused. The effects of the analogous, complementary, and other color palette schemes on your images is something I go over quite a bit in a dedicated chapter of the course, so there will definitely be a lot to talk about. The skill of putting a sense of depth in your 2D images is often overlooked in 3D. Maybe it's because, as opposed to 2D artists, we get all the depth for free in our 3D scenes. Nevertheless, implying this element is essential. Just have a look at this scene, a dramatic story point in some sort of medieval story, but it gets kinda ruined by one thing. The horse here completely blends with the mountain in the background. We lose the sense of distance, and all is somewhat muddled. A single atmosphere gradient element can change this and make the scene so much more readable. In chapter 5 of the course, I go over all the various ways depth can improve your renders. Composition, the arrangement of all the elements in your 3D scenes. Well, that sounds quite boring, but it's safe to say that it's one of the most important skills you can acquire. Most of us know the golden ratio and the central composition scheme. But there are so many variations here. In the end, it's all about balance and the story of your image. You usually want to work on balancing the composition, shuffling objects and characters here and there to make the overall image well balanced. Which is for sure a matter of your own taste, but there are also specific guidelines to achieve this. One of them, for example, is to constantly flip your image horizontally to have a fresh look at it. What you definitely want to avoid is having all the important focal points on one side of the image, creating disbalance and making it feel like it's falling over, buckling under the weight of that side. You also have the freedom to arrange your objects based on the story or the psychological effect that you're after. Say in this image, a simple camera angle can achieve so much. You tilt up and the overbearing empty space of the sky creates a feeling of loneliness and solitude. You tilt down and the attention shifts to the ocean, creating a sense of dread and danger coming from the element. In here, you shift your character to the left so that it has a lot of room in the direction that it's looking in, and it opens the character up, making it more accessible, more sympathetic. You frame it the other way, and suddenly we sort of cut off the access to the character's inner thoughts, making it more mysterious and closed off. In this scene, you have two characters talking with the space between them free. Their communication now feels clear and unobstructed. But all it takes is to put a single object here, and suddenly it feels like there is some sort of block or interruption in their dialogue. The topic of constructing a well-balanced composition and various psychological effects of placing your objects in it will be another building block we'll explore in the course. The art fundamentals part of the course will be topped off by the crown discipline, the lighting. It is the combination of using contrasts and colors in close connection to your composition. First and foremost, you want to make the key points of your image well visible and interesting. Sure, you can have a nice contrast between your foreground and background, making your character stand out. But if it's just bland and uninteresting, 9 times out of 10 this will drive your audience away. Playing with light and shadow, areas of darkness and areas of light, and focusing on what's important for your story, that's what this game is all about. For that purpose, you have a set of tools: key light, fill light, rim light, top light, and others, and all those play a different role. With lighting, you can choose to pinpoint completely different areas of your image, putting focus on different characters. All this we'll explore in the extensive chapter on cinematic lighting. This widescreen format sure is striking, but does it lend itself well for an intimate drama story? That's a valid question. You might in fact be better off with the ordinary 16:9 format, and even, lo and behold, the ancient 4:3. It's not without its merit, it actually allows for a better framing of the whole face. But that's not the only cinematic tool that you have at your disposal. From frame rate to film grain, from depth of field to vignette and bloom, all these tools are specific for the cinematic art. And quite often they can be the final ingredient that can spice up your render. Let's take this scene from a movie theater. Now if I didn't employ the cinematic tool of depth of field, leaving everything in focus, well, it would be quite difficult to pick a spot to focus on. Is it this obviously uncomfortable lady in the front? Or this one sticking out over here? Or this guy here, highlighted by a spotlight? Well, not an easy thing to decide. And again, it's actually wrong to let your audience wander around the image. You want to guide their eye. So let's make it easier for them. Let's gently force the eye by applying the depth of field blur, making it immediately known that the focus of the scene is here. There is something about this sort of ease out and ease in move that screams, I'm a 3D camera. It's just too perfect and very unnatural. Compare it to this. I take the curve and simply scale the first keyframe's Bezier on the x-axis almost all the way to 0. Then I take the end keyframe and scale it up so it's slowing down significantly longer. And then I make the move a little bit slower by pushing this keyframe to the right here. A simple operation, but the artificial feel of the movement is sort of gone. and not to mention when I add a simple shake by using the free add-on Shakeify. But camera movement is not just about knowing how to play with keyframes and shake randomization. It's also about learning the most common types of movements employed by filmmakers, from specific moves to their combinations, and throwing in zoom and focus pull for good measure. All this is the topic of Chapter 9 of the course. So again, I have this calm, everyday scene of a pair talking. But something happened here. Did you catch it? Something quite confusing that has the potential to break your cinematic experience. Yes, I've jumped across the line here. A sin number 1 of cinematic storytelling. You have this shot and the blue character is on the left. You cut to a close-up shot and still it's on the left. After the next cut, you jump across this imaginary line that we've established between the two characters, and suddenly you are on the complete opposite side of the scene. Now the blue character is on the right and the red character is on the left. And then, to add salt to the wound, you jump back to the original side. Ugh, just wrong. Knowing about the existence of this so-called line of action and upholding it in your animated scenes is one of the most important rules you can learn. And yes, switching the cameras into a medium shot like this is of course the correct way. In the course, you'll learn not only about the line, but also how to cross it safely, whereby understanding the rules, you'll be able to place your cameras freely. On top of that, you'll get more than enough sandbox Blender scenes to test your skill in them. And that is just a taste of what my upcoming course contains, from art fundamentals to cinematic art, from frame to shot sequences. I believe that in the end, you will have the confidence to jump in and start creating your own short films in Blender, which, at least in my case, is what this 3D journey is all about. Making stories in 3D. Join the waiting list for the course if you're interested, and really, I can't wait for how it will help you on your own journey.